It started as a question few dared to ask. What makes ordinary people capable of cruelty? In the summer of 1971, one man set out to find the answer, and he would discover something terrifying about human nature itself. This is the true story of the Stanford Prison Experiment. In the heart of Stanford University, the basement of the psychology building was quiet, windowless and cold. The perfect place, according to psychologist Philip Zimbardo, to build a mock prison. His goal was not to test criminals or guards, but the power of roles themselves. Could the act of pretending to be powerful make a person corrupt? Could the act of being powerless make someone break? He recruited 24 male college students through a simple newspaper ad. Male college students needed for a study of prison life, $15 per day. They were screened for stability, health, and good behaviour. No mental illness, no criminal history. These were normal young men, the kind you might see studying in the library campus or on campus lawns or playing basketball in the sun. They were told the experiment would last 2 weeks. Half would be guards, half prisoners, roles chosen completely at random. No one could have imagined how quickly the line between role and reality would disappear. The first morning, the prisoners were taken from their homes by real police officers. Sirens blaring, neighbours watching. They were handcuffed, searched, fingerprinted and driven to the Stanford basement. It was all part of the illusion, but to the young men, it didn't feel like an illusion. It felt real. At the makeshift prison, they were stripped naked, deloused and issued identical smocks with ID numbers printed on the front. Their names were gone. From that moment on, they were no longer John, Peter or David. They were prisoner number 8612, number 819, number 416. Each wore a chain around one ankle, a subtle reminder that freedom was no longer theirs. The guards, by contrast, were dressed in khaki uniforms and mirrored sunglasses. They were told they could not physically harm the prisoners, but they were responsible for maintaining order. They were given batons, symbols of power, and the authority to enforce discipline. The rules were simple. No physical violence, no real harm, but within 48 hours, everything would change. At first, everyone laughed. It was awkward, almost childish. The guards teased, the prisoners joked, and Zimbardo watched from his office, which he called the warden's room. He took notes, observed behaviour, and reassured himself that it was all under control. But something subtle began to shift. The guards, uncertain at first, began to experiment with power. They woke prisoners in the middle of the night for random head counts, forced them to do push-ups and shouted orders that grew more aggressive by the hour. When the prisoners protested, they were punished with humiliation. The laughter faded. The basement grew darker, colder, quieter, except for the constant sound of shouting. By the second day, rebellion broke out. The prisoners tore off their numbers, barricaded their cell doors, and refused to follow orders. The guards retaliated by spraying fire extinguishers into the cells, dragging prisoners out and stripping them naked. The rebellion was crushed, but the real damage had just begun. The guards discovered something intoxicating: control. They began to enforce psychological punishments. Prisoners were made to clean toilets with their bare hands, do endless exercises, or remain silent for hours. They were ordered to repeat their ID numbers over and over until their voices cracked.
I want it fast, I want it loud, and I want it clear.
5704 3401 7258 819
103.
What had started as a study in behaviour was transforming into a nightmare. Zimbardo, who was supposed to be a neutral observer, had taken on the role of prison superintendent. He no longer saw the participants as students, but as inmates. The boundaries between science and suffering vanished. Within 36 hours, one prisoner, number 8612, began to lose control. He screamed, cried, and ranted that he couldn't take it anymore. "I feel like I'm losing my mind," he shouted. He begged to be released. The guards laughed. Zimbardo told him he couldn't leave. That night, number 8612 broke down completely. His hands trembled, his voice cracked, and he began to sob uncontrollably.
"This Christ, I'm burning up inside! Don't you know? Please, 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 let me out of here!"
Only then was he allowed to go home. But the damage was already done. The experiment had taken its first victim. After his departure, the prisoners became quieter, more obedient. Their rebellion faded. The guards, on the other hand, became more creative in their cruelty. They found new ways to exert dominance, dividing the prisoners, rewarding those who obeyed, punishing those who didn't. Some guards forced prisoners to simulate degrading acts. Others withheld food or made them march for hours. They justified their behaviour by saying they were just doing their job. But by the fourth day, the environment was unrecognisable. The prisoners stopped thinking for themselves. They obeyed without question, even when the commands were absurd. One prisoner, number 819, broke down crying after being mocked by the others.
"Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing."
When Zimbardo told him he could leave, he hesitated. "I can't," he said softly. "I can't leave until they say I can." Zimbardo was stunned. The illusion of imprisonment had become reality. The transformation wasn't limited to the prisoners. Some guards who were quiet and reserved outside the experiment became tyrannical inside it. They shouted, cursed, and used psychological torment as entertainment. When interviewed later, one guard said, "I started to enjoy the power." Others felt disgusted, but didn't intervene. They followed orders, played their parts, and kept silent. In the language of psychology, it was obedience. In the language of morality, it was complicity. Zimbardo's girlfriend at the time, Christina Maslach, visited the prison on the 6th day. What she saw shocked her. Prisoners with blank stares, guards shouting insults around a room that smelled of sweat, fear, and despair. She turned to Zimbardo and said, "What you're doing to these boys is terrible." In that moment, something inside him broke. For the first time, he saw what he had created, not as an experiment, but as a descent into darkness. He called an immediate end to the study. 6 days. That's all it took for normal college students to lose their moral compass. When it was over, the participants gathered to reflect. The guards were quiet, many ashamed.
It's easy for you to say, "Oh, I wouldn't have acted that way." But you don't know. That's the truth. You don't know. And now I know what I'm capable of, and it hurts. I don't know how else to say it, but it does hurt me to know that.
Some defended their actions, saying they were following the expectations of their role. The prisoners spoke of fear and humiliation. One said he couldn't sleep for days afterwards. Another said he still felt anger towards the guard, even though he knew it had all been pretend. Zimbardo's conclusion was haunting. It wasn't that bad people became guards. It was the situation itself, the power, the structure, the illusion, that transformed good people into instruments of cruelty. He called it the Lucifer effect, the process by which ordinary individuals commit extraordinary evil when placed in systems that encourage it. The title itself draws from one of the most profound and tragic stories in both theology and human history: the fall of Lucifer, once called the light bringer. In the Bible, Lucifer is described as the most beautiful and exalted of God's angels, radiant in splendour, full of wisdom and favoured among all other angels. His very name, Lucifer, means morning star, a symbol of brilliance and purity. But pride entered his heart. He began to crave the glory that belonged only to God. And the prophet Isaiah wrote about Lucifer: "You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High." In that single act of rebellion, light became darkness. The angel of beauty became the adversary, Satan. Cast out of heaven, he fell not because he was born evil, but because he chose to defy divine order. That moment, the transformation of a being of light into the embodiment of evil became a timeless symbol of corruption through pride, power, and disobedience. It's this descent that Zimbardo invoked when naming his theory. The Lucifer effect is about that same journey, the process by which ordinary, good-hearted individuals descend into moral darkness under the influence of corrupt systems. The Lucifer effect is about that same journey, but the process by which ordinary, good-hearted individuals become monsters. It's not a story of monsters born, but of angels fallen. Zimbardo's warning was clear. Evil doesn't always begin with intent. Sometimes it begins with environment. He argued that cruelty is less about a few bad apples and more about a bad barrel, a poisoned environment that changes behaviour of those within it. Through decades of study, he identified the psychological forces that drive this fall. De-individuation, losing one's sense of identity through uniforms, anonymity, or collective behaviour. Dehumanisation, seeing others as less than human, as mere numbers or objects. Obedience to authority, blindly following orders even when they contradict morality. Conformity to the group, choosing acceptance over conscience, blending into the crowd. Passive tolerance of evil, remaining silent in the face of wrongdoing, convincing oneself it isn't their place to act. These forces, Zimbardo said, can turn classrooms, corporations, armies, or governments into breeding grounds for cruelty, not through intention, but through structure. He later applied this framework to the Abu Ghraib prison abuses during the Iraq War, where American soldiers humiliated and tortured detainees. Zimbardo served as an expert witness for the defence, arguing that while each soldier bore responsibility for their actions, they were also victims of a bad barrel, a system that normalised inhumanity through poor leadership, lack of oversight, and immense psychological pressure. Just as Lucifer's fall was not born of inherent evil, but of pride and corrupted purpose, Zimbardo's insight was that human evil is often situational, an infection of the soul by the environment around it. The Stanford Prison Experiment became one of the most infamous studies in psychology. It was cited in analysis of war crimes, police brutality, and institutional corruption. When photographs emerged from Abu Ghraib prison decades later showing soldiers humiliating Iraqi prisoners, Zimbardo said the same dynamic was at work. The system had made cruelty feel normal. His study raised questions that still haunt the world. How much of what we call evil is really a product of the environment? How many people do wrong simply because they are told to, or because everyone else is doing it? Zimbardo spent years defending his work, arguing that it exposed a truth too uncomfortable to ignore. But critics accused him of crossing ethical lines, of failing to protect his subjects from harm. He eventually accepted the criticism and dedicated the rest of his career to understanding how to prevent similar moral collapse. He created the Heroic Imagination Project, an organisation that teaches people to resist conformity and challenge abuse of power. His message was simple. If situations can turn good people evil, they can also turn ordinary people heroic if they choose to act with conscience. Looking back, the Stanford Prison Experiment stands as a mirror. It reflects something deeply unsettling about humanity, about our tendency to absorb the roles we're given. We're not immune to corruption. We're shaped by the environments we build, and sometimes those environments bring out the worst in us. Zimbardo once said, "The line between good and evil is movable, permeable, and almost invisible." And perhaps that's the lesson that lingers. The monster is not always outside of us. Sometimes it's what the world draws out from within. In the end, the experiment was supposed to last 14 days. It lasted 6, but its shadow has stretched across decades, reminding us that evil is not a mystery. It's a potential within us all waiting for permission to emerge. So the next time you look at history's atrocities, or wonder how ordinary people can commit unthinkable acts, remember this. Sometimes it doesn't take a monster to do monstrous things. It just takes the right environment. And that's the most chilling discovery of all. This is Storyverse. Make sure you like and subscribe for more stories.